Hey guys, it's your girl Courtney with Courtney in First Class. If you are new here, welcome to my channel. Pull up a chair, have a seat, make sure you hit that subscribe button and make sure to turn on notifications so that you get notified every time I post a new video. If you're not new here, hey girl, hey, welcome back. Thanks for supporting me and thanks for coming back. So in today's video, this is going to be a story time. We are going to talk about my very first in-flight medical emergency and also some takeaways that I learned from this experience. So grab yourself a glass of wine or coffee, pull up a chair because your girl is getting ready to spill the tea. So the one thing that I was always curious about when I became a flight attendant is so many people talk about medical emergencies, and I was just kind of curious as to how often that actually happens. Now, I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for about 12 years before I became a flight attendant, so I wasn't too worried or concerned about a medical emergency because in all honesty, I feel like if I were to have a medical emergency on a flight, I would be more than capable of handling it. So I wasn't really worried about one happening. I was just kind of worried about when. And it seemed like every time I talked to a flight attendant, all of them had a medical emergency story. But I did not experience my first medical emergency until I was like, I think 4 months into flying. So I feel like, I don't know, maybe I got lucky because I feel like there were two people in our class who experienced medical emergencies on their OE, okay? So I guess it happens a lot more frequently than you would think that it happens, but yeah, it does. So let's dive into the story time about what happened. My very first time experiencing a medical emergency was actually not even on my flight. So I was deadheading from, well, it doesn't really matter because I don't want to give out too much information, but I was deadheading from my base to another base where I could start my trip. And it was so funny because I had just met this crew for this 3-day and we were all deadheading over to the new base so that we can all start our flight. And, you know, we were all just kind of talking about, oh, you know, what did you do before you became a flight attendant and blah, 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 all that other stuff. And I just happened to mention to her that, yeah, I used to be a nurse. And she was like, oh my gosh, you know, that's so cool. And then she was like, have you ever had a medical emergency? And I was like, no, I haven't. And we were just laughing about it. And we were like, oh, well, it's good to know that if we have a medical emergency on our flight, you're a nurse. And so you can deal with it. And I was like, you know, and we just kind of joked about it. So we get on our plane and I am like, I love a good deadhead, y'all, because your girl travels prepared. I bring my blanket, I bring my eye mask, and I put that eye mask down, I roll that window shade down, and your girl is knocked out. Okay, I'm going to sleep the entire flight because there is nothing like getting paid to sleep, okay? And so that's exactly what I did on this flight. I had my little blanket, I had my eye mask on, and I was knocked out. And I'm sitting there and I'm asleep, and all of a sudden I hear like this gurgling sound. And I'm thinking like, I couldn't tell if I was asleep or if I was awake, but I was hearing this sound and I'm just thinking like, dang, somebody is snoring loud because it sounded like it was a mix between like a gurgle and like a snoring. And so I just kind of tuned it out, had my AirPods in, and so I just kind of went back to sleep. And then about 3 minutes later, I start hearing all these call lights go off. And I'm hearing like somebody like yelling. And I'm like, so I wake up, I take my eye mask off and I'm like, what is going on? And it's literally like where I'm sitting. So like, let's say I was in row 13, okay, 13 in a window seat. It was the person who was in row 12 across the aisle. So I could literally see him like to the back of his head, you know, what was going on. And he was with his partner. I don't know like what their relation was, but he was with another person who he was traveling with. And he's like shaking him and he's like, you know, wake up, wake up, wake up. And so my first instant thought was the nurse in me was to jump into action because that's kind of what we're trained to do. However, we were specifically told when we got hired, and they asked us when we did our medical training, our CPR training, they were like, oh, for those of you guys who are nurses, like raise your hand. And so some of us raised our hand and they were like, well, thank you so much for your service. Thanks for being a nurse. However, while you are flying, your nursing license is basically like not valid. Like you are not a nurse in the sky. You cannot, even if your scope of practice would cover you while you were on the ground, that is not your responsibility when you are in the air. We have very strict rules and guidelines that we are supposed to follow, and we cannot deviate from that regardless to what your profession is. Like, you could be a full-fledged doctor and be a flight attendant, and if there's a medical emergency, you need to handle it according to Southwest's policy, which in our case is basically you are responsible for calling the air medic. I can't remember off the top of my head what it's called, but you need to call them. You need to relay the facts of the situation, notify the pilot, and then you need to do exactly what the in-flight medic tells you to do. That's it. That's all. You do not go above and beyond that. So because it was not my flight, I was just like, I'm gonna mind my business, okay? But I'm still observing the situation to, see what's going on. So then the flight attendants come over, and they pretty much, they had it under control. They were a little nervous, frazzled, obviously, which makes sense because it was their first medical as well. And, that's not something that we train for it. But if you've never experienced a medical emergency, you've only done CPR on a dummy, it's a whole lot different than when it's like staring you in the face, okay? And that's when it kicks in that this is literally your life or death situation, and you have somebody else's life in your hands. And on top of that, you have all the passengers who are around you who are, as crazy as it sounds, still asking you for stuff. Like, you see this person have a heart attack and you're asking me why I haven't brought you your Diet Coke yet. Like, be so for real. But you will see the craziest things when you become a flight attendant and the things that people expect you to do. Okay. So the flight attendant was handling the situation. She's also still trying to deal with the passengers. The other flight attendants jump into action. One person grabs the AED. The other person's letting the pilot know. The other person's communicating with the passengers, to try and keep them back. And that was when the other crew, my crew that was flying, that was deadheading, was sitting directly behind the guy. And the girl who was the flight attendant who was trying to get the man's blood pressure, like, I don't know if the blood pressure cuff wasn't working or she didn't know how to use it or whatever. And then that was when the crew that I was flying with, she jumped in and she was like, "Oh, Courtney's a nurse. Can you step in and help?" So then and only then did I stand up, and that was when I stepped into the situation. So I went ahead and did a quick triage of the passenger, started talking to the partner to get any important information. The man was still conscious at this point, so I wanted to get as much information from him as possible before he went unconscious, if I knew, if that was going to happen. We also wanted to make sure that we were able to get vital signs so that when we did get the medics on, we were able to relay this information. And so I'm not going to go into the details about exactly what happened with this guy's medical situation, just because I don't feel that that's right. But it got pretty messy, and it was definitely a very scary situation. And I could 100% understand how, as a flight attendant, if you have never encountered a situation like this or having to do CPR on somebody, that it could be very, very scary. Because like I said, the only CPR training that we get, it was like a day, like maybe 2 hours of doing CPR. And if you've never done it before, and the last time you did it was in training, and that training was 6 months ago, yeah. The one thing, my main takeaway from this will be, it's not a matter of if you encounter your first medical emergency, you're going to. At some point, you're going to. I have had minor things like a person having a panic attack. I've had somebody go into anaphylactic shock because they were allergic to something and they didn't have their EpiPen. I've had a heart attack. I've had seizures. And y'all, I just graduated and finished training, and all of that has been in the past 6 months, okay? A lot of this stuff I didn't share with you guys because I was still on probation, and I can talk about it a little bit more freely now. But yeah, so it's like I said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So the few tips that I will give you guys if you're going through training now or just to prepare you, number one, pay attention in that CPR class. Like, literally really pay attention. I highly recommend, we do get CPR training and AED training through, in-flight training. However, I would suggest going out and actually becoming CPR certified. The training that we get while we are in training, we are not CPR certified. So you will not get your basic life-saving, your BLS certification. You will not get that. It doesn't qualify you for that. It gives you just the basics of basically medical treatment, and that's about it. But if you want to feel more confident and you want more hands-on experience, which I highly recommend doing, spend the money and just become CPR certified. You can do it through the Red Cross. You will actually get your CPR certification card, and you will get real hands-on experience for doing CPR, not only on an adult, but also on an infant or a kid, which I feel like is very, very important, just because you want to make sure that if an emergency happens, you're not going to just fall apart. Now, granted, you won't have real world experience of actually doing CPR, because doing CPR on a mannequin versus doing CPR on a real person, I cannot even begin to tell you how different it is, okay? It feels different, the chaos is different, like the whole situation is different, okay? So prep for that by actually becoming CPR certified. Even though it's not a requirement of the job, I would do it. The other thing that I would do, and I cannot stress this enough, know where the headset plugs are so that you can contact the medics, okay? I would say the thing that took the most time, the most amount of time when we had this medical emergency and when we've had other medical emergencies, is people not knowing where to plug in the headphone jacks, so that, because they're in the overhead bin and they're different on each class of aircraft, okay? So if nothing else, put to memory where those are. I have seen some people who have on their IEFB, on their screens, they have a little cheat sheet that has the service positions, what bases have Provo, and then at the very bottom, it has where the emergency headphone jacks are for the 700 and the 800, so for each aircraft. So the first thing you're gonna do in a medical emergency anyway is grab your IEFB, because if you're not familiar with what the process is, you need to be able to pull up that information. I would also make sure that you bookmark emergency procedures at the very top of your saved information, so that you're not having to go through and search for what to do in the event of a medical emergency. You can just click it and it's automatically there, because time is of the essence when somebody is having a medical emergency, and you don't have time to be going through your IEFB trying to search for what questions you need to ask, what you need to do, and definitely not where the plugs are to contact medic, okay? So you wanna go, I'm gonna see if I can find it. If I can find it, I will download it and I will add it to the downloadables. If you are a part of our membership program, then you have access to that file that has all of the downloads and the helpful information. So you definitely wanna go ahead and you wanna download that so that you can have it as a screensaver on your IEFB, so you can see without even having to log in. Like literally you can just hit the screen, and on the screen it pops up and it'll have all of that important information, because tensions are flaring when you're going through all of that and people get nervous and you don't want to be fumbling around with all of that information, okay? So that was my very first experience having a medical emergency. The guy, we were able to get him stabilized. The aircraft was met by paramedic. When we landed, we did have to divert, but when we diverted, we were met by paramedics and the passenger ended up being okay. He actually even wrote in a letter to the company after the fact that basically said thank you to all the flight attendants that stepped in and took care of him, and he ended up being okay. So I was very proud to be able to be a part of that and to be prepared and to help my crew members out, because like I said, it can be nerve-wracking and it could be very scary, and it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and you want to make sure that you are fully prepared. So when you are doing your checks, you guys, really make sure that you're doing your checks and make sure that those headphones are there. Make sure that AED is charged and that the green light is blinking and that you know where the jacks are and that you know what to do in an emergency situation. And again, I highly recommend becoming officially CPR certified. I think it's like maybe $100, maybe $120. You can do it at the Red Cross. It's a one-day class. It's like 8 hours. And it will help you feel so much better if you run into a medical emergency like that, okay? I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you have any other questions, please go ahead and leave them in the comments and I will be more than happy to answer them for you. If you have not subscribed to this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Also, if you're not a flight attendant, but you're interested in becoming a flight attendant, but you're struggling with building out a resume or you're worried about interviewing, I can help you with that. I offer a resume writing service. The links are down below where I can take whatever resume you have and I can totally revamp it so that it meets the selection criteria for any of the airlines that you want to apply for. So you just send me your resume, I go ahead and rewrite it for you, and then I send it back to you. And when applications open, you are ready to apply. I also offer mock interviews. So if you have not interviewed in a while or you don't feel strong with interviewing, you can meet with me one-on-one and we will get you whipped into shape. Okay. Once again, thank you so much for following. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, see you on the jump seat.